I think it's also important to think about how we view families. When we view families as capable and competent and rich and full of potential, we then see families as co-educators, as co-learners, as partners in their child's learning experiences. And so when we are inviting families in, if we're centering the identities and lived experiences of children, it's important that we honor the voices of families in that process and ensuring that families are welcomed into the space to share their knowledge. Inviting families to speak about experiences that will teach us a lot more about who they are, their rich cultures, their diverse experiences, and their identities. And so it's so important to formulate relationships with families because through partnerships, we get to learn more about the experiences of the learners at home. We get to learn more about the lived experiences of the families. We get to get deeper understandings of culture and identity in ways that are not tokenistic, in ways that are not just, I am inviting you in just to perform, and then leave. And so you want to have meaningful relationships with families so that when you are offering those learning opportunities, those families feel a sense of pride when they see their child engage in experiences that are culturally relevant and responsive, and that they can also be invited in to share. I can remember a few years ago in my first grade classroom, the learners were so engaged in debates about hair and whose hair was the most beautiful, and this dialogue around hair types really started to ensue. And so I started to notice and name what was happening and what types of hair textures were more valued as opposed to others. But what I did know about the community in partnership with families was that there was a mother in my class that would do hair braiding for many of the children in the community. And so I approached her and I said, I want us to plan a lesson together. I'd love for you to share this artwork with the learners and how you braid and what the significance of this was. And it had taken the parent aback because she said, well, I can't do that. And I'm like, but I can't do that. I can't speak to this experience in the way that you could. And it was a powerful opportunity for us to sit down and plan when this would happen, what would be best, what would she need. And when she came into the classroom, I sat with the learners and was so invested in what she shared. And it really created an opportunity in that moment for her child to light up, to see her mother sharing something that was so important to their cultural identity, but also for the learners to look back and see me sitting shoulder to shoulder with them on the carpet, asking questions and positioning myself as a co-learner. And within that community of families, highlighting and sharing in newsletters and inviting families, if there's anyone else that wants to plan an experience with me, please let me know. It was a great opportunity to really invite families into play-based experiences and to the learning that was happening in the classroom. And so I think about how important it is to have those relationships and to foster relationships with families, to honestly want to learn with and from families as well, because oftentimes there's this idea, this notion of power that the educator is just going to communicate and the family is just going to be the receiver. And so if we want to really invite families in and for them to see the power of play-based learning, we need to foster relationships. We need to center their experiences as well in this learning.
And so when we think about even just creating conditions for learning in a learning environment, as Angelique had mentioned, we do want to be really mindful of the competencies that the families do bring. And so as we think about those competencies, we think about how do we partner in a way to now highlight those lived experiences. So it might have been through language we learn about the competencies of maybe families who speak particular languages. And maybe through that we might then think about, okay, how do we find a text that really makes sense of that and makes sense of different languages and honors those different languages within our instruction. But we also then want to think about how do we then partner with families to see the value of play and to honor play. And that might even be to collaborate and invite families to actually share with us some of the materials, open-ended materials, that they might then maybe provide to those learners that then live within our classroom spaces. So those loose parts then come from home and children start seeing those connections to those loose parts. And sometimes we'll see that families will bring in things like textiles from different parts of the world that really connect to who they are and their identities. We might see also that children might bring in things like bangles that are loose parts that can be used in a variety of ways, or feathers and different things that come in that really speak to their identity and who they are. So that in play, sometimes they might say, oh, I have that at home, or I have this at home. And so when we think about materials, we think about how we are creating a space where children can actually start making connections and build relationships with the materials within a space. And so that's very much by offering things that speak to their identities, reflect who they are, and reflect things that they have at home that we might partner with families in doing. And when we think about those families, we want to think about even starting off the year thinking about how do we inspire families to think about play, and how do we maybe ask the question around, what are your hopes and your dreams and your aspirations for your children? How might you share that using loose parts? Show us what that might mean for you, right? So families can then share with us what the hopes are, what the wishes are for their children. And then we can then start planning a program that really centers around their beliefs, but also their hopes and their dreams and their wishes for their children.